Welcome to Say More in Raymore, the City of Raymore's official podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Harmer, Communications Director for the city. Before we get to our program today, I want to share some news and upcoming event information really quickly. First, newly, down in the Raymore Commerce Center is expanding to fill the entire 1 million square feet of their building. This expansion will bring 1,800 more jobs over the next 3 years. Newly is a women's monthly clothing subscription service, currently serving 400,000 subscribers. This expansion will allow them to add another 200,000 subscriptions. Learn more about the city, including economic development, the police, public works, parks, our form of government, and much more at the Fall Civic Leadership Academy. Raymore residents 18 and older can apply, and I only have a few more spaces available for anyone who wants to join this 5-week program. It's on Thursday evenings from September 25th to October 23rd. Raymore.com/CLA for more information and to apply. If you want to learn more specifically about our police department, Raymore PD is also offering a Fall Citizens Police Academy. That's on Wednesday evenings from September 24th to November 12th, and you can learn more and apply for that at raymore.com/CPA. The city's fiscal year is coming to an end at the end of October, and last month, City Manager Jim Feuerborn presented his proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 to the City Council. The City Council will cover the proposed budget at upcoming work sessions and will vote on approving the proposed budget at the October regular City Council meetings. There is a public hearing at the October 13th City Council meeting at 6 p.m. at Raymore City Hall if anyone would like to provide input on the proposed budget. View that proposed budget at raymore.com/budget. You can also read about it in the fall issue of The Review, our community news magazine, which is going to be in Raymore mailboxes shortly. But you can also check it out online at raymore.com/review. One event I do want to share, October 11th at TB Hanna Station, is the first Raymore Chili Cook-Off hosted by the Raymore Arts Commission. We are partnering with CASI, which is the Chili Appreciation Society International, and the folks from the Show Me Chili Pod, so serious chili folks. We're looking for cooks to compete for awards in the categories of CASI chili, which is just meat and spices, no beans or other fillers, homestyle chili, which is anything goes, wings, and salsa. Put that on your calendar, whether you want to compete or whether you just want to come out and try all these chilies. You can pay $5 for a tasting spoon. It opens to the public at noon, and proceeds will go to the Raymore Community Foundation in support of the arts in Raymore. And that community foundation is the city's 501c3. We'll have live music by the Kenny Glover Band, a community art piece you can make your mark on, as well as other activities for children. October 2nd in Belton, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. is a meeting hosted by MoDOT, an open house style meeting covering the I-49 expansion and 58 highway bridge replacement project. The construction isn't going to start until the spring of 2028, but you can view displays, learn more about the project, and leave comments at this meeting, October 2nd in Belton at the Mill Creek Upper Elementary. Missouri Good Neighbor Week is coming up at the end of the month, September 28th to October 4th. Last year, Raymore was recognized as a runner-up in our population category, so this year maybe we can reach a little higher and record more of those neighborly deeds and be recognized statewide as one of Missouri's most neighborly cities. Learn about all of these things and more by subscribing to our weekly e-news email that comes out every Friday afternoon. It includes information about upcoming events, and there are also highlights from each department on the things we did during the week that seem notable. So you can learn a lot more about what's happening in the city by subscribing to that. And that, again, is at raymore.com/e-news. All right, now to our program. All right, we have David Gress, the Development Services Director, with us today. And we are also joined by Senior Planner Dave McCumber. Welcome to the show. So David and Dave, good luck listeners keeping them apart. I hope your voices are very different.
Well, thanks for having us today. Excited to be here.
Yes, very excited.
I want to learn a little bit about you first so that our listeners who maybe see your name or see you at the meetings might know just a little bit more about you than your position. So where'd you grow up? What got you interested in the development services area? David, why don't you go first?
So I grew up in Lee Summit. I've lived there most of my life. The thing that got me interested in what I do now was actually kind of growing up always playing SimCity or The Sims or games similar to that were similar to what we do now. Oddly enough, I actually started school in college trying to become an architect and did that for a year and then realized that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And I had taken a couple of courses there as electives that were land use planning and a couple other things related to city planning and realized that was a more interesting career path for me, and so I ended up switching my major to urban planning and design and graduated from UMKC in 2016 with that degree. But it was always kind of the spatial aspect of, like I said, the video games and things that I played as a kid that kind of translate really well into what it is that we do here in Raymore.
And those video games were building cities.
Yeah. You think a lot about where different things go. Roller Coaster Tycoon is another similar one about where the fun roller coasters go in comparison. Yeah, dating ourselves a little bit here, but those things and just kind of thinking really spatially about where things are built and how they're built translates really well into what it is that we do professionally here. And architecture is obviously a related field with our building inspectors and things that we still do under our department, but just realized early on that wasn't the specific focus that I wanted to take on and wanted to think a little more broadly about a city and how it operates and how it functions and how it's built and what we as staff can do to make it better for the future.
Great. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Cass County, just to the west of Belton. So went to Belton High School. Very familiar with Raymore, had friends that grew up over here. So in the early years, early 2000s, got to witness Raymore in its pre-development kind of era, and then throughout that time period leading up to today. David and I have a lot of similarities. We both went to the same program up at UMKC, and I think if you were to probably ask like 90 or 95% of city planners like how they got interested in it, it always goes back to like, I played SimCity when I was a kid, and so we have that same exact commonality there.
It seems like it's either that or it was something else that was kind of related to city planning, and then I found out that city planning was a thing.
Most of us didn't know when we were young that it was like a profession or it was something that existed. I think there was an assumption that like, oh, it's just architects and engineers that like put cities together, which in a way that is true, but there's people behind the scenes that are actually planning out spatially where different things are located throughout the city. That's a part of our job. But yeah, so I guess the spark, began way back then, and we share that similarity in terms of how that came to be. So, but yeah, have a wife and a couple of kids, and just doing this city planning thing. It's a great profession to be in.
Nice. So, outside of work, what is one thing you have a hobby?
So in my spare time, I do a lot when I have time. My wife and I too also have a young kid, so it's hard to find hobbies anymore outside of that. But when I do have time, I do a lot of woodworking projects. Fixing things around the house has taken up a lot of our time.
Is that a hobby?
It's turned into one.
It's great
recently.
that you can do it yourself. I
yeah.
suppose.
And then outside of those things, I try to spend a lot of time outside. I'm what I would call a somewhat avid bicyclist, and so again, when I have time to do that, I do like to take advantage of the different trails that Raymore has and kind of get out and about and explore the city in that way. But again, only when our son lets us have time to do those things nowadays, it seems like.
I'm sure he's a handful.
He's
at that age.
He is. He's about 2, almost going on 3, but fortunately also in the phase where he also likes to be outside, so good opportunities for 2 of us to ride bikes.
Right. What about you, Dave?
So back before I went to school, I used to play in a band, and I played guitar, and so that was for a good decade my hobby on the side of what I did for a living at the time. When I went back to school, I just couldn't balance everything, so I had to set that aside, and at this point still haven't been able to pick it back up. And now we have children, so that's kind of my hobby now, is raising these kids, and whatever they are into or want to do, that's what we spend our free time doing, which is an awesome experience. Really enjoy it. I have a house that's over 100 years old, so whenever there is a little bit of extra time that I can find, I'm pretty much working on random things around the house.
Well, let's get into the department. In simple terms, what does development services do?
So Dave and I are more specific into the planning roles within our department, but outside of that, we also cover other things. But in essence, it's anything that gets built in the city or gets proposed to be built in the city comes through our office at some point in time, typically on the front end of any project that's looking to come to Raymore. On the front end of things, Dave and I handle a lot of the planning work to figure out, depending on what somebody wants to build, where our regulations allow that thing to be built, what special things they have to consider, studies or plans that they might have to draw up in order for Dave and I to take a look at them, or other departments outside of ours, engineering, public works, that also take a look at some of those kind of higher level pieces of information at the very beginning of a project. Outside of the planning realm, though, we also have building inspections, we have code enforcement, we have GIS, our mapping programs within the city. And so each of those has a very specific function about what they do in the development process, all the way from a conceptual idea of what somebody wants to do down to the multiple inspections that our building official and building inspectors are required to do before that project is kind of complete. But in essence, anything that gets built from a new commercial center all the way down to a shed on somebody's property, our department is pretty involved in every step of those projects.
Got it. So something that I've noticed since I've been here, because before working at a city, I had no idea what happened at a city hall. Unknown things you do are really interesting. Like finding out, oh, I didn't know somebody, for instance, like all these inspections, I guess the people that are doing the project know that, but, I didn't know all of that went into something.
Yeah, most people we have a fair balance of subdivisions that are older, that have some, remodeling, or maybe a new house is getting built on a single lot that might still be undeveloped. But we also have a number of newer subdivisions that are pretty busy with inspection work and construction activity. But outside of the builders that are routinely on those properties in terms of what residents see, they just kind of see the house go up from start to finish. They often don't have a chance to see the 40 or 50 times that our inspectors are at that property, from when they're installing the underground plumbing on that property all the way to when they're putting the roof on or pouring the driveway. There are several steps in between different types of inspections that our inspectors conduct, and while those may not directly impact the residents around the city that aren't building homes, the intent of those is to ensure that the homes that are being built next to one another are built to code, they're built safely, they're built correctly, and they're built to our zoning code, they're built to our building code. All those things come into play during all of those inspections, and the ultimate goal of those is just to ensure that what's being built in the city meets the adopted codes that we have. The one thing that does seem to surprise people is the number of inspections that it takes to complete a project, and usually that depends on the size of the project, what it is they're doing, but also the quality of the builder and maybe how long they've been in Raymore and are familiar with our codes. Usually it takes a couple of weeks to get a new builder up to speed on what our codes are compared to other cities, but usually once that happens, things go a lot smoother and a project kind of moves forward through that process.
We're also thinking about the future, so tell me about that.
So we just adopted our newest comprehensive plan for the city, and Dave and I can talk more about the individual pieces of that plan, but that's the main document that really guides what Dave and I and our building inspectors are responsible for in the city. And when a new project comes to the city of Raymore, depending on what they want to do, those are the documents that we look at to determine where it can go in the city, how large it can be, how much parking it needs, how much landscaping it needs, what studies might have to be done. Some of these things get really far down into the weeds and are kind of more behind the scenes, but all of those things are really driven by our comprehensive plan that we just adopted, between our future land use plan, our transportation plan, those different things that really guide the growth of the city. Dave and I's responsibility and our building inspectors are to take that information and basically put it into practice in the community as things are being proposed here for our city.
Always great to look toward the future, especially with the rapid growth that the city has experienced over the last 25 years or so. We want to make sure that we've got everything into place to make it successful for the next 25 years.
Absolutely.
All right, so the comprehensive plan was 6 years in the making, I believe. So tell me the process that went into creating it, gathering information, and everything to come up with this final one big plan that just ties into all of our other master plans.
Yeah. So before I get into that, for those that aren't aware, again, the comprehensive plan is the master plan for the city, essentially. And those plans are generally good for 20, 25 years of future growth. And our last growth management plan that we had adopted was around the early 2000s and has served to guide the development of the city kind of up until this point. But about 6 years ago, as kind of a next step to the strategic plan that our city council had taken on, we decided to move into the process of updating our comprehensive plan. And we utilized a lot of the feedback and the community engagement processes that we did under the strategic plan update and trying to gather feedback from our residents about, by 2045, what are the things you want to have built or accomplished in the city of Raymore. And so under the current comprehensive plan that we just adopted, you'll see a lot of ties to the past strategic plan. We had a lot of infrastructure investments into the city, from new roads, new parks, just new things to the city that really drive a lot of what we think will be the impetus for more development in the city because of those things. And so that's what you'll see in our comprehensive plan. As you mentioned, it was a lengthy process, about 6 years worth of everything from public engagement to working with our consultant for the strategic planning process to gather up that feedback and kind of summarize it and put it into kind of an actionable thing that staff could kind of take and then develop this new comprehensive plan. One of the things I generally like to point out to people when I talk about this project is it did take longer than you would typically see in a lot of cities, but one of the main things that was kind of given to us as a directive early on in the process was that our leadership wanted that document and that process to be a staff-driven process. What you see in a lot of cities in the metro around the country, honestly, is that cities will typically hire a consultant to come in and do a lot of this work for them, which is great because they bring a lot of expertise and a lot of tools, technology that the city can use to help develop that plan. But oftentimes what happens is the perception is that this consultant's coming in and kind of telling the city what it is that they need to do. And so our goal was to kind of avoid that and really only use our consultant for the important parts of that project, which was putting all this information together in a really easy to read document. But a lot of the work that we did in terms of analyzing all the feedback, putting together what our goals were for the city, was all an internal process with our planning department, our engineers, a lot of the departments that offer internal services to our residents and our business customers. But I think that if there's one thing about the plan that I think sticks out compared to other cities that I've had the chance to work with, is that staff had a much more direct role in developing this plan compared to what other cities around us typically do. And there's not really a right or wrong way to do that, but I think it's a thing that staff accomplished, although it did take a lot longer time than we were kind of anticipating. But I think it just produces a lot more authenticity in what it is that the city wants. Because Dave and I and our building inspectors and we're the ones that end up interacting with our residents day to day on either issues that come up or things that need to be fixed or projects that get approved and those types of things. So I think it's just really important to point out that that was a internally driven document based on a lot of those things that we experience compared to a couple other ways that we could have approached that project.
Right. And then some of the community input, public input, we had I think 4 community conversations between 2016 and 22.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had an online portal where you could kind of look at the map where here's where we think the, developments might happen in the future. What do you envision there? So we had multiple ways that we took input from our residents.
Mm-hmm.
So if you participated in any of those community conversations, then we have, your opinions and your comments, and those were certainly considered as we put the whole plan together. I say we. I didn't. You all did that. I didn't do very much or anything.
It was a team effort, but
yeah.
But absolutely, yeah. All of those things were captured in that process. There was a reason that we went through the strategic planning process with those community conversations, and the end goal was to always be building on the effort to update that 20-year master plan for the city and achieve that vision of growth for the city over the next 20 years.
Right, and so everything that we're doing has to relate to one of the goals of this comprehensive plan, because we want to stay on track with with our vision for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically the document that we check before we send anything to our planning commission or our board of adjustment or our city council. We have to be tying back any project or any approval or recommendation to how it meets the goals of that document at the end of the day.
Got it. What else do you want to share with us today?
I think one thing that's important, and Dave can kind of touch on the different tools that we use as it relates to the comprehensive plan and kind of the overarching document for the city, but then the other tools that we use to actually implement that. I talked a little bit about our building codes and how things get built, but one of the things that Dave and I work from specifically is our zoning code, and so he can talk a little bit more about how we use that as a department to review our projects, to make revisions to our projects, and how we kind of get to what our recommendation is on a project at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Our zoning code here in Raymore is called the Unified Development Code. It's kind of the regulatory document. If you were to think about these things we're talking about right now, as our comprehensive plan is our 30,000 foot view of the city, the Unified Development Code is 15,000 feet, and then your building codes and things of that nature are really zoomed into particular properties and very detailed information. The development code is kind of wide-ranging. It does involve everything in a neighborhood from how streets are laid out to how lots are platted and the size of those lots and what's required on those lots for new single-family homes, or this could be for commercial property. It involves looking at what sort of landscaping standards would be in place, off-street parking, screening, open space requirements. There's quite a list of different things that, depending on each project, which there could be 1,000 different variables involved with a project, how those things get addressed when it comes to development of a property. The comprehensive plan is very good at laying out high-level guidance. The Unified Development Code takes that guidance further by putting regulation in place for when new projects come through. We as staff review both of those documents, make sure that the guidance is being adhered to, but then also the regulation side of it based off of what sort of projects being proposed. So we help the developers walk through the regulatory process. That is one other thing that the Unified Development Code does address, is what sort of processes are involved, such as land entitlement processes with the proposal of a new project. So that could be this project specifically only requires an administrative review, or this project specifically requires that we take this through the City Planning and Zoning Commission and then through the City Council. And hey, by the way, because you're asking this, you may have to go see the Board of Zoning Adjustment as well. It's really wide-ranging and all-encompassing, and there's a lot of detail in it. There's a lot of sections of the development code that overlap each other, so it's difficult to sometimes go make little tweaks to the development code and expect you're going to have the outcomes that you'd like to see for all projects across the community, largely because one little tweak here or there could have major or minor impacts to other sections of the development code because of how it's written together. This isn't specific to Raymore. This is just development codes in general for any city, so that's just kind of the nature of them. But they are complex, just like the city is a complex place. So the development code does help us kind of take that guidance set at the comprehensive plan level and move it into the regulatory stages where we see development regulation put in practice.
All right, so how would someone apply to do so? I mean, where's their first step before they start anything?
Yeah, so we're typically the first contact point for a developer or somebody looking to do something on their property. We schedule what's called a pre-application meeting where we bring in the interested party to talk about what their project is. They will present it to us. It'd be the planning division, engineering, building, fire district is usually at those meetings, and sometimes a few others, just depends on what the proposal is. We sit down and talk about what sort of regulatory avenues that they'll have to traverse along the way of the project, and then let them know of any code sections that could be pertinent for them to piece together the beginning stages of their projects. And then we walk them through the entitlement phases, if they need to go to Planning and Zoning Commission, those meetings, as well as the City Council. A lot of big projects that you see going on in Raymore, staff are not the ultimate decision makers on. We write staff reports and provide our professional recommendations based off the comprehensive plan and based off of whether or not they're meeting the development code. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission typically reviews those, makes recommendations up to the City Council, and then City Council ultimately makes those decisions through a series of a couple of meetings or public hearings.
After a project has gone through the phase that Dave just described, is when, assuming those projects get approved, is when then staff has a little bit more administrative approval over things like building permits or building additions for projects that are already built. Most of those, we deal mostly with home builders in our city. In some cases, it's a resident who might be doing the work themselves on their property. And typically those folks are going to reach out to our building department as opposed to our planning department to go through the right avenues to get their permit reviewed, their permit approved, and then schedule all the inspections that need to take place. And so those are just the different types of applications that we see. As Dave mentioned, there's different boards, different commissions that we work with based on the application at hand, and our main responsibility in that is making sure that the applicant, whoever they are, knows exactly what steps that they have to take to adhere to our code, building code, zoning code, whatever the case might be, to kind of walk them through that process from start to finish.
Tell me about, in developments of neighborhoods and housing, tell me about a recent experience here at Raymore. Walk me through the things that happened in a real life situation.
So we have several projects right now that are under construction. There's one that is kind of nearing completion, and it's in the northeastern part of the city there at Gore and Kurzweil. And that project is a new large acreage lot single family subdivision. Creekside Ranch is the name of that project. And that one's unique in the sense that it pretty much had to go through every step in our process in order to get approved by the city. It was originally in unincorporated Cass County, so they had to go through the process of annexing into the city, making sure that all of the services are there that the city can provide.
And tell me really quick, what are those services?
Yeah, so water service, getting water to your property, sewer service to your property. If it's not zoned appropriately for a septic system, we provide road maintenance services for that portion of the project where they annexed into the city. Things like that about, when you build a house, what services do you want? Trash service, those types of things for our residents. And so when that property owner approached the city about trying to develop their property, those were the questions that they kind of asked staff. What does my trash service look like? Where does my water come from? How can I get water to my property? And so our engineers, our staff, go through the process of finding, where's the closest water main? Where can they hook into it? And how do they get that to their property and serve that area of the city that they're trying to develop? And the reason that project was so unique is it is on the northeastern part of our city, which is fairly rural right now, and so we don't have a ton of services up there in terms of sewer. We do have water. So the unique thing about that project is when they annexed into the city, there are still several property owners in that area of Raymore that don't have water service to their property. And so going through the process of development with that subdivision, they have extended our facilities to serve not only their development and the future building of houses, but there's a handful of property owners along that stretch of Kurzweil that are in the city but have previously not had readily access to water services. And so because of that developing, we have a couple property owners that are starting the process of annexing into the city for the purposes of getting water service now that there's a water main built that they're able to tap into. And so that's a good example of how, it's great to have a subdivision under construction for new residents coming into the city, and those will be fairly large acreage lots with what will eventually be nice homes for future residents. But it also had the impact of supporting the kind of wants and needs of existing residents of wanting to get out of the habit of having to truck in water and rely on that as a service, whereas now, because of that project, they'll have reliable water service through the city once they get through that annexation process here over the next couple of months.
Oh, that's interesting. What needs to go through the process of a single person annexing their property? And once, since that area for the development was annexed in, it's like they are touching it, and now they can voluntarily annex into the city?
So Missouri state statutes is what guides staff on annexing properties, and there's a couple different ways that properties can do that. What we've seen most frequently is voluntary annexation, which means the property owner has come to city staff and asked to be brought into the city for any reason that they provide to staff. And so that is actually a pretty short process, as long as the property owner is the one asking to do that. It takes 2 readings by our city council. We put together a couple different agreements with the property owner about you're coming into the city, and so making them aware of what the rules and the regulations are of coming into Raymore, what processes are now in place, and things like that. And so it's there's a couple different ways that residents can go about that if they wish to come into the city. But most of what we've seen so far has been residents that are not in the city approaching us to ask to be brought into the Raymore city limits.
Creekside Ranch is an existing project. What is in the works? What's coming up next?
Well, there's quite a few different developments that are either already under construction or will be here shortly. Internally in the department, though, we are working on some amendments to our development code to specifically look at neighborhood design and spend some time thinking about it in different ways than we have before in the past. We want to try and create more diversity throughout a subdivision, or if you want to think about it like on a particular street. And when we say that, we're talking about the diversity of the buildings that line the street. So some things we've seen in the recent past is kind of the change in how housing is constructed and developed. And so there's a lot less of the small builder out there today than there used to be even 50 years ago. Now we're starting to experience a developer that is also the builder of a project. So they will come in and develop a subdivision, and then they have 4 or 6 different houses that they will line the streets within that subdivision. Sometimes those 5 or 6 houses are duplicated multiple times on a street block. The only differentiation that happens is the color, or maybe there are shutters on this one that aren't on that one. And so what we want to do is figure out a way to work with the building community to provide more diversity in those homes. Not necessarily the house itself, but its relationship with the street. So what it looks like from the street. And so our team, as well as some folks that we have relationships with on the private sector in different areas, such as design and the building community, have been putting together a draft code that we could take to the city council for consideration to address things like that. So we're starting to see less monotony in newer subdivisions. The newer subdivisions, it's at their core, they're providing new housing units, which every community across the country right now desperately needs to fill the gap between what's available and how many people out there need these homes. So there's that part of it that needs to still be focused on. However, we think that there is an opportunity to spend a little bit more time and attention on the relationship between those homes and the public space out in front of them. So we're working on that right now. Actually, we have some code drafted up that is being reviewed by the Kansas City Home Builders Association. They've kind of circulated that out to a lot of the home builders in our area and those that are currently building in Raymore. Once we get that feedback, we're going to take that information, see if there's any sort of tweaks that we can make to it to improve upon, and then take that through the city council to have them take a look at it, give us some feedback, and then hopefully closer to the end of this year we'll be able to adopt those new sets of regulations. And in the long term, the goal is that we're building new subdivisions across the community that have their own distinct character and create spaces outside of the home that draw people in, that people find interesting and want to spend time going for walks through or playing out in their front yards, things of that nature. So that's kind of the high level goal with that kind of code revision, and we'll see how that plays out.
The thing that's important about that work, if you think about a lot of the subdivisions that Raymore has across our city, most of those were built under the direction of our previous comprehensive plan. And so, as we talked about earlier, the goal of adopting our new comprehensive plan is to really think about our city a little bit differently than we have before. And the importance of that, you'll find if you read through that document, it touches on a lot of what Dave just mentioned about how neighborhoods are built, kind of how they interact with the street and what people see from the street and the sidewalk and how they use their neighborhood. And so the importance of that is that, as Dave mentioned, we're responsible for working with the building community and also with our residents. And so the importance of that document being adopted is that it allows staff to really guide the discussions more with the people that are wanting to be here in Raymore and build homes in Raymore, and to be able to now point back to a document that the council has adopted, that our Planning and Zoning Commission has adopted. It sets those expectations and kind of codifies them. And so when we have those conversations with a builder that may not be open to some of those things, or they want to maybe go a different route, those tools give city staff the ability to just at some point kind of make the determination that maybe Raymore is not the community for you to be working in. It's not that what they're building is inherently bad or good or bad. It's just that the document kind of clearly spells out what the things are that staff needs to be looking for, and that's the work that Dave and I have been trying to take on to improve in our city with our regulations and help really guide that development based on our new comprehensive plan.
So basically, you want these neighborhoods to be cohesive and charming, just basically a more neighborly, attractive space or neighborhood that encourages people to get out, meet their neighbors, and it's cute, for lack of a better word. Like,
cute is a good way to put it.
It's cute and attractive.
One of the things that Dave and I focused really hard on, if you think about the elements of a house, and there's multiple ones, but the thing that we focused on is what is it that the people in the house and the neighborhood engage with most. And if you look at older homes, Dave said he lives in a house that's 100 years old.
So do I.
And so do you. And if you look at those, you'll find similarities between those about the elements of what's in those homes. And it's about the relationship to the street and your neighbors. So think front porches where you can mingle with your neighbors or your family. Think about the driveway and the garage and the front door and the entrance to those things. We've just found through our research that it's a lot more about things like that than it is about the color of the house or the type of roof that's on the house. And that's generally what a lot of cities look at when they start thinking about regulating the diversity. And I think you can look at a lot of subdivisions around the metro, even not just in Raymore, and kind of see that while those things are inherently different when it comes to those elements, we're kind of taking the position that there's more that can be done with that. And so we're hopeful that, as Dave mentioned, we got a home run, and that will result in better conversations and better quality development when it comes to diverse housing. But as he mentioned, we may go through that and realize that we may have to go back to the drawing boards at some point if it doesn't achieve that goal. But that's the beauty of our zoning code, is that it is a living document. There's processes that are in place to make those changes and seek the feedback like Dave was talking about. So, stay tuned for that work to be presented to our city council here in the next couple of months.
Well, I know my opinion doesn't count that much, but I love that idea.
We love it too. It's funny, both of us, he lives in a house that's 100 years old and mine's only 30, but it's funny, both of them have front porches that both of us really enjoy. And so just being able to relate to that, hopefully folks can understand why that may seem really simplistic, but we think that it has a big impact on how people interact with each other.
Right. Well, as we wrap up, what else do you want to leave us with? Any final thoughts?
The one thing I'll just kind of end my thoughts on is that there's always a lot of questions about what's going on in the city and what stage something is at, or at what point somebody might be able to share their feedback about a project. The answer I like to always give people is just call city staff. We're here 8 hours a day. You can send us an email if you're not available during those 8 hours a day, but we're here to review applications and understand development requests and those types of things, but we're also here to answer the questions of our residents and help them understand where something is at, or why something's being built, or what processes are coming up for them to engage in the project. We send out notices, we put requests into the paper. There's several different ways that we try to get information out about projects, and so I just always encourage people, if you can't find those things out there in the newspaper or on our city website, the easiest way to get that information is just to call our department. Whether it's a question about an inspection or a question about a subdivision that's going in, we're here 8 hours a day to answer those questions at any time.
Sounds great. And the website is raymore.com. You can look up David Gress, Dave McCumber, and your contact information is there, and as well as a whole section on development services, which encompasses far more than we've talked about today. So maybe at sometime in the future we can come back to a couple of those other areas, divisions of your department.
And we also have, you helped me here last year with a couple different publications that we put out. Not everybody has time to call or email, but a lot of those things we've put into brochures or pamphlets or flyers that if you're trying to build something or whatever you're trying to do with your property, we try to make it as easy as possible for you as a resident to understand that. So there's a lot of publications on our website, thanks to our communications department that put those together, that's just another way to get the information about something specific you might be trying to do. But again, if you can't find that information, we're here.
And we also have these at City Hall. They're in postcard form. If you want to come and take all of them, from building a deck, a shed, pool, fence, yeah, everything.
Anything.
Having a food truck in town.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is covered in those informational postcards, and those are right in front of the development services code building
counter.
inspections window.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for sharing a little bit about your department today and what you do, and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.